Reserve. The root of all our evil, it begins with the Federal Reserve. Hey, yeah, well, let's go back in time when everybody was so proud of a man.
I'm Tommy Salmons. This is year 0. Today, I have Ace Archist and Josh Childress on the show. I invited Ace and Josh on the show to discuss narrative and the importance of storytelling in modern times. How we can utilize storytelling and narrative to spread the ideas of liberty and get away from the idea that we have to be throwing facts and philosophy and theory in people's faces all the time. These strategies of philosophy and theory bore a lot of people. A lot of people are not interested in your philosophy and your theory. They are interested in your narrative. They are interested in the way you make them feel and how you approach their lives with your ideas. So I thought it would be a good idea to have a couple of guys that were writing fiction on the side to discuss these ideas. But first, RyanBunting.com. For all of your graphic design needs, go to RyanBunting.com. Ryan Bunting is a great anarcho-capitalist and a great libertarian, or so he says. But he is definitely a great graphic designer. He designed my podcast logo and Pete Quinones' podcast logo for Free Man Beyond the Wall. So go to RyanBunting.com for all of your graphic design needs and check out his book, Project Manicore. Also, coming soon to the Libertarian Institute will be a Year 0 shirt designed by Ryan Bunting and Top Lobster. So thank both of them for their efforts in collaborating on this project. I'm really excited to have this out and plaster my face and name across your chest. Thank you, Tom Burton, for the music. Enjoy. Board on the computer.
This type of stuff is one of my favorite topics I never get to talk about usually.
Yes, thank you. Yes, I am here, as you hear, with Ace Archist and Josh Childress. Say hi.
Hey guys.
Hello.
So we're going to take a different turn here than most people take. A lot of what's been going on with the podcasting community, and I've kind of been on the outskirts of it. I've tried not to get too intricately involved in it because I'm not really sure what the entire goal is. But a lot of people are talking about praxis. And one of the things that has struck me, especially after like really diving in digging into Crisis and Leviathan, and especially chapter 3. I know Ace has read it. Have you read Crisis and Leviathan, Josh?
No, I mean we went over it in like history in college, but I've never read it in full.
Okay, so I really kind of got stuck in chapter 3 when Robert Higgs is talking about ideology, and he mentions 4 things that create ideology, and those 4 things are cognitive, affective with an A, not effective but affective. So you're talking about emotions, and then programmatic, which is programming, and solidary, which would be like community, right? And so you need these 4 things to build an ideology. And without one of these 4 components, an ideology is rendered impotent. So one of the things I feel like is missing, and I think that I'll get people like agreeing with me on this, in the liberty movement in general, is the affective, the narrative, those things that draw emotions. So I wanted to talk to you two about this and how to utilize. We're all writing short stories, which we didn't know that about Ace until here recently, but we're all writing short stories. So we're all like kind of like at least like dabbling in the fiction and in the storytelling realm. And I'm wondering why this doesn't come through in the messaging when it comes to liberty. Either of y'all can take it from there.
Joshua, you want to go first?
I would just say that, I mean, Pete brings it up a lot, that people, you know, like it or leave it, like people live in Ancapistan in their head or whatever, and I'm not an ANCAP, but I get what he's saying. People get so wrapped up in this theory, in these ideas and staying true. And I get that. Like you know, having my background, I find it, you know, I've been tricked on a couple of occasions by propaganda into like devoting my life to things that are counter to my views. So like, yeah, I see the importance of theory. Like you want to make sure your first principles are in order. But I mean, this is something I've gone on for, I would say since 2015, 2016. I kind of came to the conclusion that, you know, Ron Paul didn't bring me to the liberty movement.
Right.
Rothbard, Mises, those guys didn't bring me to the liberty movement. Punk rock and Robert Heinlein and Hemingway brought me to the liberty movement. Like the things that I heard in those songs, Bad Religion, the things that I heard in those songs, the things that I read in those books resonated with me personally. And I thought, and I mean, even Hemingway's a communist, but if you read The Sun Also Rises, that's about a dude who writes stories, goes around Spain, drinking, fighting, running with the bulls, and just kind of like doing as he pleases and letting nobody tell him what the fuck he's going to do. So, and I mean, Robert Heinlein is full of these characters. The Moon is a Harsh Mistress is a penal colony that revolts against the earth. A penal colony on the moon that revolts against the earth. Like, it's all full of these stories. And just for me, like, I've always been kind of an artistic person. So those things resonate with me much more deeply than kind of and I agree, theory is important. You want to understand the bones of what you're standing for, to make sure that you're not standing for something you don't want to be tricked. But like you said, Tommy, it's that emotional response that usually gets people to move.
Right.
Yeah, and I would just I agree with everything you said there, and I would just add to it. I think this I've thought about this for a while, and I actually really think this goes back to the problem of like with libertarians, like their rhetoric. Like it's not what they say, it's how they say it a lot of the times, how they convey the message itself that hurts them. Aristotle, when he was inventing like rhetoric, he talked about you have three main components. You have ethos, logos, and pathos, right? And logos is like the logical, like the logician side of your brain. It's the type that libertarians are overly good at. They're very good at like logical arguments and structures like that. Then you have pathos, which is the emotional connection in an argument. If you're trying to sway people, you need to get that hook in there. You need to hook them in. You need to find out what motivates them, what creates that fire in their soul, and then get a hook in there and somehow, pull on that a little bit. And then you have ethos, which in my opinion is crucial. You can't get anywhere without ethos, which is this idea that the person you're trying to convince or convey a message to has to believe that you're on their side in some sense, even if you disagree with them, right? They have to know that you're not a threat to them, and they have to know that you're not just trying to swindle them or trick them in some way, right? And a lot of libertarians they're really good at logos, but they suffer terribly at the other two components.
Yeah, and I think this is what we all three of us kind of gotten involved in a conversation on Twitter the other day about immigration, and this is kind of what I was trying to like convey during that conversation. It wasn't that like I know where you're coming from. You know what I'm saying? I told Ace this. Like I know where you're coming from. I know what you mean. Like because I know you. Like like that's not. I'm worried about how the words get twisted. You know,
Sure.
Orwell was writing about this in the 40s. He wrote an essay. I don't know if either of y'all have ever read it, but he wrote an essay called "Politics in the English Language," and he's talking about how politicians like twist and turn the English language. And so my debate with either of you is never about like what you're saying or what your message is. It's how you're approaching it, right? It would be like because Josh had said something about he said we don't need open borders or closed borders, we need no borders, and I understand what he's saying. But the first thing my thought process like ran to was, oh, so now like these uber like communist, you know, people are going to be like, yes, we want no borders, which means we want no property, and therefore no property. Like you can only have no borders without property. And so I'm like, okay, like wait, that's a mistake to word it that way. Like, I'm not saying that what you're saying is a mistake. I'm saying the way you're saying it is a mistake, you know? And so,
right. And what I was saying was being reactionary, which I hate being reactionary, but I was being reactionary to, you know, I've said open borders for a long time. And then now the refrain is, well, open borders is just as statist as closed borders. Well, okay, if we're gonna fucking play that, then I'll play back. But like that was my thing. I was like,
right.
As much as I don't want to be a reactionary, I was being that because I'm like, whatever. If we're gonna play word games, we'll play word games. And I know Tommy, you know this. My point is that the arguments against free migration mirror very much the same arguments against drugs, against sex work, against it's all based on possibility. It's all based on a narrative of the sky's gonna fucking fall. And there's not a lot of proof. There's actually a lot of proof saying that things are probably just gonna be pretty much what they are now. If we but that's not where the narrative ever goes. And so I mean, you're right. I've got a lot of work to figure out how to couch that without being reactionary, without playing these semantic games.
Well, I'm trying to put together in my head and calculate, and I mean, y'all are, you know, probably smarter than me in many ways, at least strategically. And I'm trying to put it into my head is how do you approach these subjects of these so polarizing debates in such a way that you're able to incorporate the fiction, the storytelling, in that narrative that does capture that emotion and get to the heart of the problem, which is getting people to emotionally relate to what you're trying to say. And I'm just thinking, like, because we do have that experience working in the fiction world and drafting these ideas in a way that are storytelling machines, that it's up to us to come up with stuff like that. We can't wait on a Hemingway. Like, he's not coming. Like, we're past that, right? We're the people that are here now.
Yeah.
Right.
No,
So I've got some theories, and I'd actually love your guys' feedback, because this is shit that just bounces around inside my head, and I don't really know I mean, I've spoken to other people a little bit about it, but I would like some feedback if you guys if you have any thoughts on it.
Yeah.
So as far as my fiction, I basically I write stories that are interesting to me, and the the characters. What I'm trying to avoid is writing propaganda. I have zero fucking interest in being a propagandist.
Right.
I don't want to although I may at some point in the future try to write a story from the eyes of a migrant crossing the border, but that's going to be a very delicate issue because I don't want it to come across as propaganda. I want it to come across as a good fucking story about the difficulties people face crossing that treacherous terrain.
Mm-hmm.
But so my thought is, if you have the spirit of liberty or a heart for liberty, if you believe to your bones that man should be free, and that's your first principle, that's where you start everything from, then your stories, as long as you tell your stories in a truthful way according to your value, not even to your values, but to yourself. If you tell your stories in a way that is true to yourself, then those messages are going to come through. I don't think Hemingway was trying to convince me to live my life freely when he wrote A Sun Also Rises. He was trying to write a beautiful story about what he saw as beauty in the world. And I think the same thing about Heinlein. Heinlein might have been a little bit more trying to convey a specific political message, because science fiction is a very good medium for that. But so I think if you're that type of person, like we are, like all three of us are, just write those stories, and that stuff's going to come out. Because I think if you read a propaganda story, any of us are going to catch it a mile away. You're going to see it, and you're going to be like, this fucker is trying to pull one over on me, and
Yeah.
I'm going to lose interest fast.
Right.
Yeah. I think there's nothing worse than when you try to, when someone tries to force a message in a story. Even if it was a message I agree with, I still look at the story and I'm like, ugh, you know what I mean? Like, you see this in some movies or television shows, or, even songs, when it's just like in your face, forced down your throat. It comes across as dishonest, almost like you don't really care about the story itself. You're just trying to force that message. A good example of this would be if you compared like the Chronicles of Narnia or the Lord of the Rings to some of these movies where these made for TV movies where it's Christians are trying to force their opinion, you know what I mean? Whereas you take Tolkien and take C.S. Lewis, they're very Christian men, and they write beautiful stories that have these Christian themes interwoven within their stories, but it never feels like they're trying to force something on you. They're just showing their perspective, you know what I mean? So I definitely agree with you, this whole idea of we should try to propagandize. It's well, you got to be very careful with that, or else you're going to come across as dishonest, which is a death nail.
Yeah, I don't think that's what I think what I'm trying to get at is not so much how we're writing our stories, but it's how do we integrate that fiction idea into the message, right?
So
right.
The thing that just popped up to me is Ayn Rand.
Right.
I read Atlas Shrugged.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed it. I actually I couldn't get through Fountainhead. I read Atlas Shrugged, and I thought, I like mechanics. It's an interesting story. And I agreed with pretty much all the shit that was in there, or the, at least the broad strokes. But then I started to reread it, and I was like, God, this is fucking repetitive and annoying. And I couldn't make it through the second time. And I finally saw people that trash Ayn Rand all the time. I'm like, oh, I get what they're talking about.
Yeah.
Because once I've gotten the first taste, it's just, so I guess that was what I was getting at with my approach to just being true to yourself as a writer first. Have either of you read We the Living by Ayn Rand?
Yes.
I
So that's just a story.
Yeah.
Like there's no preaching in that. It's just a story of the fucking absolute horrors of communism, of post-Bolshevik Russia. It's just a gritty, grueling, awful story, but it's beautifully written.
Yeah.
And I think that's my favorite story of hers. I thought it was absolutely gorgeous, and anybody could read it without coming away like feeling icky, like they've just been preached at.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying.
But Tommy, to your point, I think. Oh, go ahead.
Oh no, I get what you're saying about the propagandizing and things of that nature. Mm-hmm. What I'm trying to get at is how do we incorporate? Because us three have like this artistic bone. Not every fucking autistic libertarian anarchist has that ability to communicate. We have an ability to communicate in specific ways. How do we touch on that when we are communicating our messages on Twitter? How do we tap into that fiction? How do we tap into that narrative? How do we tap into that emotion? Because you've read some of my stories, Josh. I've read some of your stories. We've kind of traded some back and forth to kind of like look over. You know, like one of the things I'm doing with the language that I'm incorporating in my fiction is I'm very much interested in evoking emotion. Like that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to wake up certain emotions, try to bring people into that story. You can't spread this any message without dragging somebody into that narrative. They have to be part of it. They have to feel like they're part of it. Like, and we have experience doing that. So it's up to us to try to figure out how to incorporate those tools and that tradition of writing into the narratives. Even when we're talking non-fictional, we have to incorporate that fictional style of articulating a message.
So I don't know that this is an answer straight away. What I've been doing lately is reading Vulture and Declaration, because she writes.
Beautiful writer.
She writes,
my dude, man.
the things that I want to be saying, but she writes them so fucking beautifully. Like I was just reading the the Dominant Idea, and she starts off with that like illustration of the morning glories that she helped to plant and watch them grow, and then one of them got clipped, and then she had to watch them slowly die as the blossoms would bloom. And I haven't gotten to where she's going to tie that into. Now on Twitter, that's a tough one because
she's a fucking poet, dude. I'm so glad. I'm so glad that you started reading her. I remember when I brought it up the first time, you were like, "Oh, great! Now I got something else to fucking read."
Right. Yeah, I found like a collection of her essays, free PDF download online, and I've just been working through. So she wrote this one. It was like a letter or an essay to Emma Goldman.
Yeah.
And she starts off like basically rehashing the gospel in her own words, and like talking about how Jesus was hated for the things that he did, and how Emma Goldman's mission was very parallel to that. And it was just so beautiful. I've read it like 4 or 5 times now. It's like, it's so fucking beautiful.
I'm not even gonna lie. I've never even gotten past her essay called Anarchy, because every time I open up anything that says Vulture and Declaration, I'm just like attracted to that, and I just love reading that essay. It is so gorgeous.
She has a great one called.
I always said that. Somebody actually added me the other day saying, like, because Jose Gallison's doing a series on the Anarchist Handbook that Michael Malice released. And somebody was like, you got to talk to fucking Tommy about Vulture and Declaration, because he loves her. And I was like, dude, her fucking prose, her literary prose are like the best. Like I could just lose myself in that. Like I was so disappointed that she wasn't hot. That was it.
She has this great essay. It's called Anarchism and American Traditions, and she does kind of what you're saying, Tommy, where she I don't know if you've read this one, but she interweaves the American, the original American individualist spirit and ethos into and trying to say that it started out as an anarchist spirit, but then it lost its way. And she really interweaves these concepts of the early American tradition with anarchism, and it's just beautiful.
Very Patrick Henry style,
Yes.
Yeah. No, I was just like I said, I was just kind of disappointed she didn't look like Stevie Nicks, back in the 70s. Man. But other than that, I mean, I love reading. I love reading her because, like you said, it is the most beautiful literary, just takes you to another place.
And that is what we need, right? That is something you can argue with people, and I know this very well. You can argue with people all day on Twitter, and you can use the best of your ability, arguments. But ultimately, it's not there's think what you want about Stefan Molyneux, but he had this great quote a long time ago that I remember, which was that you can't reason someone out of a position that they were never reasoned into effectively, or it's very hard to. You know what I mean? So, a lot of these you have to pull on their.
Robert Higgs talks about this in that chapter on ideology, where he's talking about these inconsistencies, these what we would call cognitive dissonance nowadays, is not an unreasonable position.
No,
because they have found a community that they belong to, and what is more rooted in the idea of humanity than tribalism?
Yes.
And so, and going around calling every fucking Tom, Dick, and Harry not a real libertarian is no way to build a tribe. You're not building a community.
That was what I was just now thinking. As far as messaging goes, and this doesn't really go back to the fiction part of it, but watching all the shit that's going on Twitter right now and in the podcast sphere. all the mudslinging and name calling and not real this and whatever the fuck. I'm thinking back to myself in the Border Patrol with, I'm sitting there in the belly of the beast with these doubts in my head. And I guarantee there's tons of these people that are getting name called right now that have doubts in their head or have, they're curious about something. Now, if I would have I met Thad at one of his little events. If he would have come to me and said, "You're a fucking pig. You know what? You're nothing but a cop. Get the fuck out of here. You make me sick. You stand for everything that I believe is wrong in the world."
That's what Doug Stanhope would have said to you.
Right. And would I have...
But it would have been funny when he said it.
Right. But I would have walked the fuck away and probably just figured something else out.
Right.
But he didn't. He said, "Hey, I don't talk to cops, but tell me what you're thinking." He didn't shun me. He didn't call me names. He didn't treat me like shit at all.
Right.
He said, "Hey, tell me what you're thinking. What's going on?" So I think that's just for, that worked for me. Maybe some people do like that hard-nosed approach. So maybe we do need people that do sling mud and all that shit. For me, that's never going to fucking work. If you challenge me, if you get in my face, well, yeah, I'm just going to fucking harden and steel against it. But I personally react well to patience, dialogue, communication, those things. That's how, and that's one of the main reasons I don't get involved in more of this shit, because I'm this is not my style.
Right.
If this is going to be this back and forth, this hostility, fuck, I don't want any part of that. That's not me.
Actually, I think this ties really well into the community aspect too, because I think Scott Horn has this great thing, right? Which is like you attack the right from the right and you attack the left from the left, right? Because if you're a left winger and a right, and you appear as someone else appears to you as anti-left or a right winger even, and they start, critiquing your positions, you're automatically going to be in defensive mode. You're gonna be like, oh, I've run into this type of person 100 times before. I know, his arguments, I know my arguments. But when you come at them from the left, you're coming at them you're critiquing them from a place of being a peer and not an enemy. You know what I mean? So if some dude on the street just comes up to you and starts harassing you, you're obviously going to harden up and you're like, oh, well, get out of here. I don't need to take this. But if it's someone you regard as a peer or a friend, you're going to take that a lot more seriously. Right. So I do think if you are going to go at that, use that hard nosed approach, you need to do it to the left or to the right. If you're talking to a leftist, you need to do it to the left of them, or to the right, you need to outright them in some sense. If you're going to try to appeal to, because this goes back to what we were saying, you need to appeal to their own inner sensibilities before you can make any headway.
Michael Malice says this really well. And I think I heard Jordan Peterson say it too. But they're saying, the basic idea is, you don't know 99.9% of the information that's out there. It doesn't matter how smart you are. It doesn't matter if you're asarchist, right?
Oh, God.
It doesn't matter. You do not know 99.9% of the information that's out there. And so you have to approach people as if you could learn something from them.
Yes.
And if you don't approach people as if you can learn something from them, then they automatically know that you are just there to basically virtue signal. You're basically there to pat yourself on the back. And this is one of the things I'm so sick of, is people just trying to get high fives from other people, right? Mm-hmm. That believe the exact same thing that they believe, without looking at the arguments that are being presented to them. I called this congressman, or wannabe congressman, from the Libertarian Party, who's down here in the 2nd District, which is where I live, of Texas. I called him a fucking poser. What did he do? He goes and blocks me. Why did he say, why did you call me a poser? If you're fucking in this for the fact, you're not going around calling potential voters trash. You're not going around talking about people that have probably 90% of the same beliefs you do. You're not talking shit to them. You're going to talk to them. You're going to talk with them. You're going to try to talk out the issues. I saw Ace and Nick have a disagreement on Twitter the other day, and then you quote tweeted and you're like, I love this type of conversation, because y'all are both being respectful. Y'all are both talking with respect, because you know each other. And there's too often that people are talking to people like we're not neighbors, like we don't know each other, and I could give a fuck less what somebody that lives in New York City thinks about the way I live my life. Right. It has no bearing on me. It matters not to me. I'm just like, okay, go fuck yourself. That's why you get that GIF I'm always fucking posting, because I'm like, you people are fucking stupid. You think I fucking care? As far as I'm concerned, you just sound like a damn retard, just bouncing around like, oh yeah, I got an argument. Okay, whatever. You have an argument. I don't give a shit. And it doesn't matter to my life, And so I look at a lot of this in that way, but somehow the Democrat and Republican parties have figured out how to capture the narrative, how to capture the emotion, how to capture the audience. And libertarians, whether you want them to vote Libertarian Party or you want them to just start acting, in dissent from the state, you're going to have to make that message more palpable.
Yes. Yeah. I completely agree with that. Tommy, are you familiar with thick versus thin libertarianism, the concept?
It's very similar to big L versus small L, isn't it?
No, it's more like so thin libertarianism is a libertarian. These are the most common type of libertarians. The libertarians who are just like libertarianism means the nap and self-ownership, right? That's like how we promote the message. That's how we define it. Whereas thick libertarianism would be something like it can be left wing or right wing. It can be something like Hans Hoppe talking about like intentional communities based around some other type of cultural belief. So they're libertarian. So a thick libertarian is a libertarian who still believes in the nap and self-ownership, but they also dress it up in other type of like social and cultural beliefs as well. They also, because they feel like those cultural beliefs will help support the nap or support what an anarchist community would actually look like, or like would help foster the ideas of self-ownership and the ideas of community and stuff like that.
Right.
So for a long time, I was kind of too dismissive of thick libertarianism, because I thought, well, libertarianism, it ultimately is just the nap and self-ownership. But recently, for the past couple of years, I've begun to change my mind on that, and I think that you really do actually need to add on like other cultural elements to it, because that's how you get people to that's how you get more people in. You need to like focus in on certain cultural elements, whether that be right or left. I'm not taking a stance here, but like,
Right.
you need to pull them into something they already care about and show them, actually, if you really cared about this, here's a better way to do it.
Right. And this is something that we go back to Vulture and Declare. She writes about in that essay, Anarchism, where she's like, this is not going to look like what you think it's going to look like. It's not going to be Ancapistan. It's not going to be, a commune. It's like anarchism is a combination of people voluntarily acting in any number of ways and learning how to act, as a society and as individuals at the same time. And I kind of lean more to, lately at least, I mean, I consider myself an agorist, but I kind of lean more to the mutualist kind of like aspect of it, because people would be acting not only in self preservation type of activities, but they would also be acting on a communal level.
Yes.
But it would be a voluntary communal level. It wouldn't be one that's forced. And this is where I got into arguments with, this is when I abandoned the term libertarian a couple of years ago in 2019. It was when these libertarian, like, puritist started coming at me like bitching about my defense of Tehran. And I was like, but nobody's coercing anybody. Like, wait a second. Like, what are we really about? Like, you're talking about getting the state out of everybody's like business, and then you're mad because these people act collectively as a commune to get rid of all the violent, coercion that they've had to deal with their entire lives. Like, no, sometimes these monopolies on violence, these mafias or these governments, are so big and so monolithic and so collective in themselves, it takes an army to fight an army.
Yeah, I think one of the, or actually, I Josh, you want to take this one, because I don't want to like keep speaking and.
Well, I mean, I agree with your analysis of thin versus thick. Like, I think all those other areas is where the emotion resides. Like, that's where the emotional responses will reside. I guess if I have a problem with it, is like the way that I've been seeing that manifesting. And maybe this is where I need to fucking pick up the slack and start something of my own. It's starting to look very trad.
Yeah.
Very, which is fine. Like, I don't give a like, dude, if you want to live a trad life, awesome.
Right.
Like, I want a libertine life.
Sure.
Like, I gave up libertarianism for so my official title, which kind of started out as a joke, and it actually kind of fit, like latitudinalist libertine. So the latitudinalists, I don't know if you guys are familiar, it was a sect of Anglicanism who basically got sick of all of the like infighting between the different sects of Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
And they were like, look, all this fucking structure, all of the morality, all that stuff, none of that matters. There's these core principles that matter, and that's all we should care about. And you guys can all do it your own way if you want to, but stop fucking fighting over it.
Right. Yeah.
So that's the latitudinalist, which I think eventually morphed into what we now see as like the Unitarian church.
Sure.
But I think latitudinalist sounds cool. But yeah, like that's the whole point of it, is like, hey, to each their own, but let's stop fighting over this shit. Like, as long as we got the core principle together, like, do as you want, like,
right.
But stop knocking each other for it. Stop saying like you're not a real Christian or you're not a real libertarian or whatever. I think living a life of like experimentation with substances is absolutely fine, and you shouldn't be embarrassed about wanting to have that life. And if you don't want to have that life, you shouldn't be embarrassed about not wanting to have that life.
Right.
The same thing with sex work. Like, dude, I've done some seriously shitty work. If you've ever crawled through an attic that was on fire at one point in summer in Phoenix, you probably think that like sex work sounds pretty good. Like, it's you can get some pretty miserable work to where you're like, you know what, I might take a D to get out of this attic right now. So I guess that's just me. Like I love like freaks and weirdos and aberrations and queerness.
Sure.
And like I love all that shit. I get that a lot of people don't.
Uh-huh.
And I want everybody, the trads and the queers, to all feel secure in their being. But what I'm seeing a lot in the thickness of libertarianism lately has been like, no, we need to distance ourselves from this. We need to distance ourselves. We don't want to be seen as these weirdos. And I'm like, well, you don't have to be a weirdo, but like, you don't also have to distance yourself either. Like, why can't we all just get along? Like, I'm a fucking, I'll Rodney King it. Like, can't we all just get along?
I completely agree with that. I think like a good distinction we could make is like the thick libertarians who want to be like imperialistic about it. Like they're saying, no, all libertarian society would have to look my way. Right. Like I completely don't agree with that at all. I do think like I think it's more closer to it's like, a generous interpretation of like Hoppe would be like, people who are like-minded are generally speaking are going to form in communities with other like-minded people. Right. Mm-hmm. And there's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. But I do see your point. It's very important to not assume that it's like, well, no, we should be constantly attacking this other group because they're, not like us or they don't share the same beliefs. It's like, okay, as long as they're not going to actually, try to destroy your group, then just leave them alone. Right. That's ultimately it. Because I do think the thing that thickness offers, like in the libertarian sense, is it offer this sense of community. It's this easy buy-in for people who are already swayed one way culturally or the other, whether that be left or right. And it gives them an easier buy-in to these principles. So I think that's the pro side to it. The con side is what you said, though. It's certainly that there's certainly some people who do want to be imperialistic about it and say that no, only my group should be dominant.
Yeah, that's yeah. I mean, I can't argue with any of that. And this was kind of when I was, and I'm not trying to call Buck out because I love Buck to death. He's a great dude. But this is kind of what we were talking about whenever I had him on here recently. We were discussing. I was asking him. I was like, "Do you think that you have to go after the left?" Now his argument, to be fair, is he feels like the left, and which a lot of these minority groups tend to cling to, is a more authoritarian aspect of life, and especially political life at this point in time, which I can see. And this isn't saying that every trans person or every gay person or every black person is authoritarian. It's just saying, oh, okay, there is this aspect where there was was it Ta-Nehisi Coates who said that he said something along the lines, and I don't know if it's the same person, so correct me if I'm wrong. He said something along the lines that the answer to past discrimination is present discrimination, and the answer to present discrimination is future discrimination. So it's like, okay, so we're in a cycle that's never going to end. That's like basically what you're saying, is that because black people were enslaved and Native Americans were, which I very much my people, if we want to get into the genealogy of my family, were persecuted, that they have the right to oppress other people, and then once they've sufficiently oppressed the white people, then the white people can come back later on at a future date and re-oppress them. This just seems like a never-ending cycle.
It's cultural blowback.
Right. Like, exactly. And this is exactly what I called it when the George Floyd riot started. I called it blowback. I was like, this is fucking blowback.
Yeah.
Whether it's realistic or not to believe that African Americans are being targeted by police, that's the narrative that they've been told. So they're going to react, in kind. And that's what we've seen with the riots that have taken place. Excuse me.
Yeah. And I don't mean to be so reductionist about it, but this all does come down to collectivism, right? That's like that. There's, you could say some good things about collectivism in the sense that, if you want to be generous about it, it gives the people a sense of community, a sense of meaning. You know what I mean? But this is the ugly side of it, where it's like when you feel like you've been wronged, you tend to take it out not on a specific individual, but the community that they represent, or that they're a part. Not even that they represent, but just that they're a part of by proximity. But
is there any way away from that though? It's like, that's one of those questions I've been struggling with, and I've been reading a lot of Jung lately, and dealing with his idea of the collective subconscious, and really like studying that and kind of trying to wrap my mind around. I mean, I'm sure you've read Jung, Ace, because you've read everything. But I just, that's an idea that's really difficult to wrap your mind around. Like, I don't know if you struggled with it the way I'm struggling with it, but I don't know if there's any way out of this collective mindset. And then I'm bringing back this Robert Higgs idea that ideology requires these 4 tenets, and one of which is solidarity. And is solidarity. He said solidarity. I like solidarity because it makes sense to me, but it's communalism. It's tribalism in some way, shape, or form. So I have to wonder if this isn't an evolutionary thing that we're never going to get away from.
I've thought about this for a while, and it does nag at me. It brings up a really great point, because at a certain point, I do think there are certain I certainly think it's possible to get away from, or else like libertarians, like the 3 of us right now would not exist in the way we do, right? Like, even if we might have some even if we might fall prey to some cultural biases every once in a while, we still ultimately generally see everyone is an individual at the end of the day, right? Now, so while that's possible, I do agree that it's very hard very hard to get away from it. I think the process to like deprogram people's like tribalistic tendencies is often can take a really long time. As far as what we can do in practice, I think, this is going to sound, I'm just repeating it. It's not going to be anything profound, but honestly, just getting these people away from the stage, right? Because
Sorry, I'm not laughing at you. My dog just ran in here and ate a moth right in front of me.
But yeah, just getting these people away from state power. If people are going to have tribalistic tendencies, I'd much rather they get those tribalistic impulses out through things like sports or some other type of tribalistic tendency that we can use to sort of like neuter their impulses. Do you know what I mean? Because right now it's just like if people have tribalistic tendencies, the worst thing you want to do is give those people power over other people. I know that's not helpful, but
no, I just don't know if I've even gotten completely away from tribalistic tendencies, because everything I'm building, everything I'm doing, like this podcast, my property, everything has to do with my kids. And so there's this like kind of tribal mindset in every action that I'm taking.
Absolutely.
So it's almost like, okay, maybe it was the separation of family and create the creation of the nuclear family, which like Josh can speak on a lot because he's a Thad fan. So he knows it just as well as I do. Like this creation, this dissecting of the traditional extended family.
Yes.
And bringing it down to a nuclear family.
Yes.
And then separating the father from the family.
Yes.
And incorporating this old idea. And this is kind of what I was trying to get at with Buck. I don't know if y'all listened to that episode, but this is kind of what I was trying to get at with Buck. Is this old idea now that, and I've had Democrats say this to me, and I'm not going to call them leftist because I don't even know if I would consider these people leftist, but they've even said we are a family. And it's like, no, I'm not related to you. Live in San Francisco. I have nothing to do with you. You have no common ground with me. I've never met you. I would not want to be around you. Like, no, that's not a family. And you can have a selective family.
Sure.
You can't choose your family. That's fine. I'm not saying it's all biological and genetic.
Absolutely.
But we all have this desire, and you and I actually talked about this with Coop and Matt about this desire for camaraderie and about Childress and this, that. And so I'm like, even if you like take us as individuals, we have this desire for this extended family.
Yes, absolutely.
This tribe of people that we want to be involved in.
Right. And when I was speaking, I want to clarify something. When I was speaking of collectivism before, I was more speaking of like the ugly side of it, right? Not necessarily like the camaraderie, which I fully support, but more like the, I guess what would be commonly known as like inherent like bigotry, just because someone else is different from you, right? That type of like collectivism, rather different than wanting camaraderie. I think those two can interweave a little bit, but I completely agree with that. And I'm sure Josh can speak on like the nuclear family, because that's something that bugs me too.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel the same way about the nuclear family as the rest of it. Like, I get Thad's point about, I mean, fuck, it would have been we had twins. Like my wife and I both had full-time, very demanding careers. We were both working like 50 to 60 hours a week. Luckily, she was able to work from home, but like we had twins. We were remodeling a house. Life was fucking hell for like that first year. And it would have helped a lot. It would have been so fucking nice to have like an aunt or an uncle or a grandparent or whatever, like somebody else there to like pitch in. And we scraped by and we managed. But now that we've kind of got it on our own, we're like, we kind of like not, we live far enough away from our families that, they can't just drop by. Yeah. And we like it that way. So I see both sides of it. But as far as like, so you said you've been reading Young, Sebastian Younger, similar last name, but he writes about tribalism. And this really struck home with me because of my military service. So he's embedded with overseas troops before, and he talked about, and he actually kind of like clued me in on some of my own, because when I came back from Afghanistan this last time, I was a wreck for a couple of weeks, and I didn't understand why, because I didn't see anything really that traumatic. Like, we had some kind of minor attacks, but it was not like, I never saw, there was no gore, like there was nothing really that crazy. So I was like, why am I having such a hard time? And then Sebastian Younger's work on tribalism, he's like, dude, you've been with these dudes relying on each other to watch each other's backs in cramped spaces for a year. Of course you're going to, like, it's almost like a drug withdrawal. You don't have these guys anymore. You're on your own now. You're back in the big fucking scary United States where you're all alone. So I think there's something very, very valuable to having those people you can trust, having those people, and any good tribe is made up of strong individuals. So that's not cutting out the individualism.
Right.
Each person's still accountable to themselves. You got to make sure your weapon's clean. You got to make sure your powder is dry. You got to make sure all this stuff is set for you so that your tribe, when they need to rely on you, can rely on you.
Yeah, it's really hard to have these discussions a lot of the time with like other people, because it's like collectivism is a term that is like very poorly defined a lot of time, or like tribalism.
Yeah.
Like, and there's a lot of different definitions. Some of them are like, some of the like definitions are bad, some of them are good. But yeah, just what you said, like individualism, and there's a type of individualism and a type of collectivism that interweave, and that they're not contradictory, and in fact they complement each other.
Right, and that's the point of that we're all trying to find, and there are a lot of libertarians,
Yes.
that do not understand that. Okay, dude, you want to be an individual? Go out there and be an individual, and you're gonna get your ass fucking handed to you.
Right. And if you make it, congratulations, great.
Yeah, but I mean, you're not gonna make it. Like nobody. You're like Ted Kaczynski only made it because nobody knew he was being an individual. Right. And he only made it until they recognized that there was this individual acting individually.
That's right.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Like you're not going to make it. Like it's just not the way things work. Like the American Revolution was not fought by George Washington alone. Right. You know what I'm saying? Like, and he was a shitty general too, just to.
Right. Yes.
He couldn't have done shit without the Prussians and the French, but it was just, that's just the way it goes. Like you can't, you don't like the family matters, right? You meet a spouse, whether it's same sex or not, you partner up with a spouse to travel through life for a reason, because life fucking sucks when you're alone. Right? Like, like nobody wants to be alone. We are a species, a social species of some sort, but that doesn't mean that you can push some fucking arbitrary social doctrine down our fucking throats either.
Right.
So,
and honestly, if a social doctrine has to be forced, that implies that the tribe is not cohesive.
It's not healthy. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. And so that's not a tribe you would want to be a part of anyway. Right. So it's like, if it has to be controlled by force or by, threats of violence, then there's no camaraderie. It's hard to say that there's camaraderie there, if it had to get to that point.
Right. There was I don't remember. I want to say it was Jacob Hornberger that said it, but it could have been somebody else. But they had said that taxes are the price you pay to pretend you live in a civil society.
Yeah.
Right. And basically the idea was that if the society were so civil, people would voluntarily do what it took to take care of each other. You wouldn't have to force them to do it.
And this is a point where it's like, you know, a lot of people view libertarianism as like atomization or autarky, as it's sometimes referred to, where it's just like, you know, people just want to, you know, they just want to go out and live in the woods by themselves with no one else, and that's really a lie. Like, I don't know any libertarian. Well, actually,
I've never heard a libertarian put forth that argument.
Right, exactly. Yeah,
even
so usually
even agorists who get accused, we get accused of it all the time.
Oh yeah, yes.
And I'm like, we never said we didn't believe in hierarchy. We just believe in earning your spot.
Right. Yeah, and it's like, you know, but really, if you really like look at like the history of the state and the history of America, the state is the ultimate atomizing agent, because the state destroys local communities. It destroys actual like natural order, spontaneous order, like brotherhoods. And because it has to do that, because it has to separate the individual from their natural community to then be reliant on the state. So it takes them out of like a natural, healthy collective and like makes them reliant on a parasitic one. Right. So that's the actual, like, the state is the one who atomizes and separates people, because people need to be separate for the state to have something to offer them. Right. Yes. Like, just as you were saying, if people were relying on each other and doing stuff, that what could the state offer them besides like threats of violence?
Yeah. Josh?
Tommy, you brought something up kind of at the front end of this section of the conversation that I wanted to touch back to. I feel like libertarians, anarchists, whoever we're addressing in this, you know, people that care about getting the state out of their fucking life. You talked about how there's, you know, these groups that, you know, historically have been oppressed or feel like they've been oppressed, or feel like they're still being oppressed, when you were talking about Ta-Nehisi Coates.
Is that who wrote that? Do either? I want to say
I think you're right. I think because people talk about a lot how his thing is basically that no matter what we do, there's always going to be oppression. So if that's the case, what's the fucking point? Like, why try?
Yeah. I just want to make sure I'm talking about the right person, man. I don't want to.
No, I think you're right there. Okay. I feel like the liberty movement is missing out on a pretty big opportunity by openly assuming that these disparate groups, or these disenfranchised, if that's the word you want to use, groups, which I know we don't like to really want to group people, but at least at the moment, you know, like, if you look at Stonewall, that was very clearly, they were coming after gay clubs. So they had to band together to fight back, and they were successful. Yes. So, I mean, you should look at that. So, and, you know, gay clubs are clearly not rated anymore. So, like, that was a successful movement. So we can look at that. But you're right that a lot of these groups gravitate towards the left now. Obviously not all of them, because there's some of those individuals in the liberty movement now, but a lot of those groups, a lot of those individuals that identify with those groups gravitate towards the left. And the way I see it, maybe not all these libertarian or podcaster folks or writers or whatever see it the same way. The way I see it is, these people are gravitating to the left for the same reason that immigrants gravitate towards Democrats. Not because that the values align, but because there are open arms.
Yeah.
So the left is opening their arms to these groups. In my view, those open arms seem to be full of nothing. Like, basically, like, they seem only interested in capitalizing on the oppressive quality of that group, or the visibility of the oppression of that group. Right. They're not actually interested in helping or furthering or liberating any of the things associated. They're concerned with talking about it, with bringing attention to it. Where I think the liberty movement could open their arms as well and say, look, yes, you guys have been oppressed historically by the state. The state has been the apparatus of oppression for these groups. So that's what we want to take care of. That's what we want to get out of our lives.
Right.
And so I see it as a mistake to assume that, these oppressed groups, or however you want to call them, are automatically going to identify with leftist views. They may just be identifying with the fact that they're being welcomed in by somebody.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
100% agree.
And that's kind of my whole point in talking to y'all about this, because I see it. All right. So I'm old school, so I might be a little trad here, but just fucking around. But the fact of the matter is, if you're unable to attract these groups, if you're unable to speak to these people and to get this movement behind you, then there's something fucking wrong with you. And that's what the whole point of what I was asking about the narrative, because apparently the liberty movement, I hate calling myself a libertarian. I'll do it for you two or for Scott or for Pete, because y'all know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But I just don't do it normally. But the fact of the matter is, the liberty movement is not talking to these people in any way that's effective. So how do you speak effectively? It seems like Higgs described it the best by saying you have to be affective, right? You have to be emotional. You have to be speak to their feeling. You also have to be communal. You also have to offer them a place to go and something to be a part of. And it doesn't seem like, it kind of seems like the Libertarian Party has always treaded water. And I think when you look at how the Libertarian Party has gone since it was founded in 1971, a lot of the guys that were there during the founding of the Libertarian Party abandoned it and started making alliances and coalitions with people outside of it. I'm thinking, primarily of Rothbard, where he went towards the socialist left for a while and tried to create alliances with them. And then towards the end of his days, he had the paleo strategy, which is what Buck Johnson and Tho Bishop are talking about. And I can't say that I blame them, because you look at what libertarianism is, and it's so fucking impotent. It has they don't have any way of actually connecting with any of these people. And I don't know, how do you create this mindset, this mimetic structure of freedom amongst 330 million people? I just don't know if that's possible.
I think it has to be, I think it kind of has to be a decentralized collectivism, if I can use kind of contradictory language here, or paradoxical language. But you need a decentralized, okay, so, there's going to be trad groups in the liberty movement who are just not going to be as receptive, right? So trying to convince them to be more receptive, I think, is actually just as counterintuitive as doing it the other way. I think instead, there should be more leftist. There should also be leftist thick libertarians who really stress community as well, who will welcome these groups in as well, right? So while we might never be able to say that, well, there's these trad groups over here who might not be as welcome to you, there's also these libertarian groups who share the same central premise as these trad groups, but not with the other cultural baggage that might be unwelcoming to these marginalized communities. And I think that's kind of how you have to grow. So I don't think we should expect a single libertarian strategy, because then we get into Hayek with the knowledge problem. There's no way we could assess properly one strategy to be compelling, or one strategy to be worthwhile. We need to have a decentralized strategy with all these different effects. where these different groups, like these subgroups, can kind of like try different things out. And because if you have leftists, I completely agree with what Joshua said earlier, how, you know, there's a lot of these marginalized groups that get turned off if we just had a libertarian movement that was explicitly trad. Or on the other side, there might be like conservatives who might get turned off if we had just one liberty movement that was very like libertine, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So you definitely need a bunch of different groups that might not ever agree culturally with each other to kind of have their own little collective or communal spaces, right? And I think that's how you sort of like, because if you have that, then you can pull conservatives and liberals down to your level in like the liberty space, even though they might never culturally agree or get along.
Right. I fully agree with that. I fully agree with that. I'm not trying to dismiss anything you said. I just had another thought. Like while you were talking, I don't know the guy's name, the king pilled dude, just make more money.
Matt Erickson.
Matt.
Okay. So I don't fully agree with like exactly the way he put it, but I think he's onto something as it pertains to what you were talking about, Tommy. Americans are dumb. And what do they look to? They look to celebrity. So if you can get a writer, and I mean, that's kind of what I'm working towards. If you can get a writer that is recognized among the masses, then you can, you know, every writer, like even Chuck Palahniuk, there's a tiny fraction of people in the country that's read his book, but a tiny fraction of 320 million is a fucking lot of people.
Right.
So if you can get some successful writers, if you can get some successful screenplay writers, musicians, which we've got, you know, there are some in the liberty movement that are making waves. I think that's big, and I you know, Thad talks about that in his work, that the Soviet Union was much more worried about jazz and blue jeans than they were about the actual propaganda, the actual, you know, the message that the state was coming with. And so I think we can use art in the same way, but that takes dedication. Like you know, you can't. I'm afraid to say, like, I don't think you can really do all the things that you're wanting to, like, you can't do a bunch of things and be a great fucking writer.
Right.
That's why I don't spend, I mean, I wrote one op-ed for Libertarian Institute this year. And that, it took me as long to write, you know, 1,000 words for Libertarian Institute as it takes me to write 7,000 words for a short story.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Just, that's not my wheelhouse. I can sit down and do it, but am I doing better? Because I tweeted that out and I didn't see it. I didn't receive a fucking peep about it. Nobody gave a slightest shit about that op-ed that I took a week to write. So I guess we'll see once my fiction hits the stands, if anybody gives a shit about that either. But like, to me, that just feels like more my special, that's more where I'm geared. So I'm going to spend the vast majority of my efforts on that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I find it much easier to write fiction than I do to write nonfiction. I'm with you there.
So I guess as far as like practically applying the arts and fiction writing and narrative and stuff like that, I mean, unless you find a way to like tweet in parables, you know, in a creative way that actually does send a message, which is not a terrible idea, I don't think. And Ace, on it, like we always like talk you up, but like, dude, you got a gift. Like however the fuck you're able to stay, however you're able to stay patient and like on point and coherent, dude, I can't fucking do that. The amount of shit that I think about tweeting and then think about how I'm gonna have to deal with like following through with it, I'm just like, it's not worth it. So like, you know, you're doing something that I kind of wish I could do.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
I think
so that's awesome, and I think it's useful.
I think I tell Ace every time he comes on the show, I'm like, dude, I would kill somebody. I couldn't do this. I would turn around and find the closest person to me and choke him. I would just be like, this is fucking ridiculous. This person is so fucking stupid. Some of the retorts I see to Ace are so fucking dumb. There's no way I could be near as patient as he is.
You know what makes that it's so worthwhile though is like some people have told me that I've actually like changed their minds on things before. Like they've DM'd me and they've told me that, hey, you know, I disagreed with you, but I actually think you're right. Or sometimes even when they say, you know, I still disagree, but thank you for the conversation. Or especially what I really love is seeing that all these libertarian, like sometimes I know when there's someone coming at me and not coming at me in good faith, you know what I mean, arguing and they're just, you know, just pulling every, you know, sophist retort ever. And then it's like I see other people in the liberty space have fun like dunking and memeing on them, you know. It's kind of fun. It's kind of like a collective activity that can kind of, you know, temporarily, you know, unite some people in just for a moment. And I think that that's what the joy I get from it. Well,
dude, you're planting seeds. I mean, not to go too biblical on you, but like that's where it's at.
Right.
Like all the stuff that formed in my head that made me quit the Border Patrol, that was all planted in 2011. Yeah. I know exactly when I learned all that shit. But I learned it, but I wasn't able to apply it. I didn't have the tools to apply it. I didn't have the life experience. I didn't have the ancillary knowledge, the ancillary philosophy. Yeah. It took that time. It took from 2011 when I learned all this stuff till 2015-ish when I really started being like, oh my God, I've made a terrible mistake. Right. A very lucrative mistake, but a terrible mistake nonetheless. And that's why I always tell people, you know, like a lot of people be blackpilled, and, you know, I can completely understand why they would think this. It's like, look at all these people. It's so hopeless, right? But then you have to think that, well, wait a minute. I was one of these people at one point too. Right. A lot of us were one of these people at one point too. So just because we think it's not working out right now, let's just give it time and see what happens. Every person you can turn from a status supporting like mass murder in some other country to then saying, oh my God, this is wrong. That's a win, right? That's just a win.
All I know is I can tell you exactly why ex-smokers are the worst people to be around when you're a smoker. Because
yes, we are. Yes, we are.
Because statists are the worst people to be around when you're an ex-statist.
Yes, yes, like, right.
You're like, oh my God, I can't. Like even in my, I wonder
if there's a psychological thing like that. You know, they used to be me, and they're like a reflection.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. You're kind of looking at yourself. You know, be careful when hunting monsters that you don't become one.
That's right. Yeah.
And so no, but I notice this in my everyday life. Like when somebody at work, or a customer or something like will start talking politics. I'm just like, I'll listen to them and I'll be like, yeah, I might have thought that like 4 years ago. Like and I'll just stay quiet because I'm like, okay, like you're missing the big picture, you know, because I number one, I don't want to get into it at work. I'm like, okay, I have a podcast to talk about these things. I don't want to talk about it at work. Like, you know, and it ended up getting my ass fired or some shit over some shit I say. But at the same time, like, yeah, no, it's that conundrum where you're kind of looking back at your old self at times. Mm-hmm. And even when I'm like, sometimes when I'm talking to my dad about politics, like I will get so frustrated with him because I'm like, yeah, dude, I thought that like 5 years ago. Right. Like I've come past that. Here's the logic I used to come past that. And he'll be like, well, that didn't make sense. Well, it made sense for me, damn
right. It. Yeah, exactly.
So,
right. Yeah.
But hey, we've been going an hour and a half, and one thing I wanted to do in this episode, because I know both of you have an immense amount of respect for each other, I wanted to give y'all a chance to ask each other questions about anything. And, you know, Josh has has mentioned to me that Ace has become one of his favorite guests on Year Zero, and I know Ace, know of Josh.
Oh yeah,
from Unregistered.
Yes.
So I wanted to give y'all an opportunity to like talk about anything here at the end here.
Okay. I kind of want to ask Joshua, like, what was, and maybe you already answered this on Unregistered. It's been a while since I remembered it. But do you remember, like, was there a tipping point in your ideological change, or was it like more of a slow, like domino fall?
It was slow.
Okay.
So, I remember I loved that job. I fucking loved, like, chasing people is, I feel guilty about it because, like, now that I say it, it's fucked up, but, like,
Sure.
dude, it was as close to, like, real live, like, that movie, Surviving the Game with Ice-T from the 90s. It was like these rich people, they hunted homeless people for sport.
Yep.
Obviously not like the same thing, but like I was like, it was exciting. And like,
yeah, sure.
I thought I was doing a good thing. And like, I fucking loved the job. Like it was, when I wasn't doing that job, like I just drove around and listened to books and podcasts. It was, and I made great money. It was win, 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 win. But it was like, it was almost unconscious. There was a point a few years in where it was like a gut feeling. It was like, something's not right. This isn't as fun as it used to be. And I thought maybe like, oh, I'm getting tired, or I need to try like a new position or something. But I was like still enjoying the chase. And then when I would make the arrest, it was like, oh, this doesn't feel good. And I started thinking about that. And it was like, as I was going through these things, I was also simultaneously branching out my listening, my reading, to more libertarian and anarchic fields. And those places started answering some of the questions that my gut was like nagging at me about. Now there was a very definite moment. So like I went and did I did the Thad's Unregistered weekend in LA, and I talked to him, and I still wasn't, I kind of went there hoping like he'd be able to say something to me that would like flip a switch and I could know one way or the other. And it didn't, it really didn't. I got back from that, and he recommended Brian Kaplan to me.
Oh yeah.
I love Brian.
I started listening to, I remember there was like a stationary position. A lot of times you're roving and you're like moving around, and then sometimes like you're just in a stationary position and all you got to do is like watch with binoculars. So I was in this stationary position. I remember exactly where I was, and I'm listening to these fucking Brian Kaplan podcasts that I downloaded, and I was just like, oh, this is wrong. I can't fucking do this anymore. Like it was, I remember like that day was when I was like, this is it. There was no more ambiguity. It was, I decided this is out of the bounds of my fucking ethics.
Was this, I'm sorry, Josh, was this before or after you had talked to your wife?
Before.
Okay.
It was probably another week before I like found a way to like talk to my wife.
Okay. I was just curious.
Well, I mean, like I said, I bought a house, started a family. Like I waited until I got this job before I got married because I didn't want to get married without something stable beneath me. So like I built my whole life around this career. But yeah, so luckily she's a great lady, and she's a little shocked at first, but very understanding and supportive. But yeah, so it was very slow, but then there was like unfortunately there was like, a year and a half of like saving money and making preparations.
Sure,
and like showing up to work every day and like just gritting my teeth. Like,
but that still takes a lot of moral courage. A lot of people, when faced with that, just turn around and don't ever like look back when they're ever like confronted with stuff like that.
It was tempting. It was very fucking tempting because I was like halfway to retirement. I was, I think like 13 years left. I would have had to go. which
And
is long, but it goes fast.
how have you? I don't know if you and I have ever talked about this, but how have you made the adjustments financially and supported your lifestyle since then?
Well, like I said, so before I got married, my father-in-law actually paid for my wife and I to go to a Dave Ramsey event before we got married, and that was actually part of the reason that I took the job with the Border Patrol, was because I was like, I quit college, I was tired of going into debt, and I wanted to get out of debt. So my whole time at the academy and like my first year in, like I didn't drink the whole time at the academy, except for like I think twice. I drank once when I got pepper sprayed, and then like I think one other time. So the whole time I'm at the academy, I'm not spending any money. I'm just like paying on debt, paying on my student loans, paying on everything. So by my first year in the Border Patrol, I was out of debt. And then once we had a mortgage, we paid over, because my wife and I were both working full time and making decent money. So we were like paying over the mortgage and like paid that down really fast, so that when we sold, there was good equity. So a lot of it was just, we were being, and this is obviously kind of funny coming from somebody who advocates like a libertine free spirit lifestyle, but like we were just being very fiscally responsible. We didn't live we've just lived a very basic life. We didn't have a lot of frills. We didn't do a lot of vacations. We didn't have any cable bills or anything like that. We just kind of had a very basic life, and we were very happy. I mean, it was nice, other than work being very stressful. So we were just kind of, having that year and a half to like intensify what we were already doing and like, save money and everything. It's just, I went over, and my first job out was my pay cut was about I was making about about a quarter of what I was making previously. But because we had been preparing and like had equity in the house, it was manageable. And so we've just kind of continued that. My wife works, and I freelance work now, which sucks when it comes to paying taxes, but
Right. You still doing construction?
Yeah. For now, I've got a friend he's kind of a businessman, and he's looking to start some kind of business venture, and we've known each other for a long time, and he'd like me to kind of be the operations manager or something, if he gets something started. So I may be getting out of that. Hopefully that'd be nice. But yeah,
it's like the most beautiful job in the world.
Yeah, I don't mind the work when there's no tenant, like when there's nobody home and I can just do the work and put in my headphones. I don't mind it. It's dealing with people that I fucking hate, because they always like to watch you. They like to watch you work and ask a million questions, and I'm like, just leave me alone and let me fucking do my thing.
Right. But yeah, no, that's great though. Like that takes a lot of like moral courage to just, not just believe it, but actually like follow through. You know what I mean?
Right. No, it does. And that's why I always say Josh is my hero, because and I mean that, like, because I don't know if I could have been in a situation where I were comfortable financially and walked away from it. I just don't know. No matter what I believed in my heart, no matter what I thought about it, I don't know if I could have done it. And
like some of my favorite
especially
people in
with,
like,
I'm sorry, Ace. I was
go ahead.
I was just gonna say, especially with 2 kids depending on me. I know what it's like to be a father. I have 5 kids. I know what it feels like to be a father, and I don't know if I could do that. Like, that's got to be tough.
Some of my favorite people in the libertarian or anarchist space are the veterans who are anti-war anarchists. You know, they like those are like the people who I would like put out front. You know what I mean? Like, who are the people I'd want to promote the message the most.
Right.
Like those, like just the people who were in the system and then who were a part of it, like intrinsically, and then came out of it and then had their opinions just completely changed and their values like reaffirmed or like transitioned, and then they reaffirmed them. That's so heroic to me. Anytime those people like pop up in the movement, I always like to promote them.
Yeah, no, for sure. And they're even some of the guys that I talk to, like one of my favorite people to talk to, if y'all listen, I know Josh listens a lot to my podcast, and he's heard me talk to Matthew Ho. I love talking to Matthew. I could talk to Matthew for fucking hours. Yeah, it's like Josh.
He's sharp. He's really sharp.
I love that guy. He's such a sweetheart of a guy too. He's just so easy to talk to, and such a genuine person. And like he's he's very willing and open about going through PTSD and coaching people through PTSD. And I love that about him. He's just and he's a leftist, but I don't mind. I just tell him he's economically retarded. He just doesn't know what he's talking about. And he laughs, and we just move on. You know, we're actually supposed to do, I need to get a hold of him because we are supposed to do an episode on economics, him and I.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. And actually talk about what we actually believe economically. So I think that would be interesting because we both just adore each other, you know, immensely. And so that'll be a fun conversation, and I need to follow up on that. That's me dropping the ball. So it's not natural.
So, Ace, I don't think I've ever heard. I saw somebody on one of your tweets today said something about you being homeschooled. So that's the first. I don't know anything about like your background. One of my favorite things
that was on one of my tweets. Somebody talking shit to Ace.
That's my friend Melissa.
You're not homeschooled?
No. I actually am homeschooled. I actually was homeschooled, but not by the person she said I was.
Yeah, not by Cotton.
Gotcha. Not by Cotton. No.
Well, yeah, no. That I picked up.
Yeah. No, but I was. Okay. Yeah.
Yes. So one of the things I really like about listening to you interact on podcasts, and it comes out, although you're not afraid to like call somebody an idiot.
But sometimes I reach those points.
But you usually like let them get you to that point. But I value your temperament and your approach, just because that's appealing to me. The firebrand does not work for me. Like I'm stubborn enough that like if you come at me with a bunch of aggression, I'm just gonna shut down and I'm either gonna yell back or I'm gonna ignore you. But like you're even temperament and like I don't know how to describe it, but like you're a pleasant person until you're given a reason not to be.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. It's something like I always try to remember. Okay, this person is. I want to do two things here, right? If I feel like they're coming at me in good faith, I want to just approach them and say, here is why I think you're wrong. And not that I always try, like when I start out, I never want, I rarely ever go personal, right? I try never to go personal because that's an instant way for someone just to shut down. You know what I mean? So I just want to say that, look, if you're wrong, then you can benefit it's fine that you're wrong. There's nothing wrong with being wrong in some sense. You know what I mean? Like if especially if it's coming from a place of, you just did not have the knowledge. So it's like, if I can show this person that, hey, here is actually, a more consistent way to look at things. It's like, at best, I can change their mind, which does happen on occasion. It's not too often, but even if I don't, I planted seeds in their head maybe that they might think on later on, And if they're just being if they're just like trolling me or something, well, I can troll back and have a good old time. So no matter what, I'm going to have fun.
I like that. I ever like almost once a week, I'm like, I need to fucking remember to have fun. Like,
right.
I need to remember that this should be fun. I should be enjoying this.
Yes.
Not just like these conversations, but like life in general, writing, playing with my kids. Like it should just be, I should be enjoying it. So where does that come from you? For you, is that like a religious upbringing, or like where did you get that outlook?
No, actually. So that outlook actually came from reading Albert Camus, The Myth of Sisyphus. That book probably changed my life the most. It is probably one of my it's very philosophical and very like nerdy for the first portion of for the majority of the book, but the way it ties it all together and ends, it shows. I don't want to spoil it if you're planning on reading it, but I'll check it out. Yeah, it's one of those where it's like so Albert Camus is an absurdist philosopher, and his whole point is that his whole thesis is that there are times in life when you're going to be faced with what he calls the absurd. And the absurd is this idea that people look for answers in the world and the universe does not respond back with anything, right? It is just like you have this indifference. It gives you this indifference. And it's this meeting point between the two that causes people stress and anxiety a lot of the time, right? It's this seeking an answer and it always being out of reach. And the idea is that, okay, there's a lot of things out of control in your life that you cannot change, but what you can choose to be is you can choose in some sense your reaction to them. You can choose, like, it's this idea, if the state wants you to be oppressed, the best thing you can do is do everything you can not to be, even if you fail. Right. So Camus has this great quote, which is that the only way to live in a world in an unfree world is to become so absolutely free that your very existence is an act of rebellion. Right. And that is anarchism to me, ultimately. That encompasses everything I believe. And you have to constantly, even in the face of absolute failure, you just keep going and you keep pushing. Because that is what it means in some sense to be authentic to yourself. And that's what it means to just keep on fighting, right? Because for Camus, and I'm kind of treading lightly because I don't want to spoil the book if you're planning on reading it, but Camus' ultimate point is that the only true philosophical question, or the first philosophical question, is, should I continue living, right? And once you get past that point, once you answer that for yourself, then everything else kind of falls into place.
I'll be honest, I'm hit or miss when it comes to reading philosophy.
Yeah, I understand.
I've found that I love talking to people about philosophy, but sitting down and reading it,
it's a really short book. It's like 30 pages. Okay. It's like 30 pages. It's like
I can muscle through 30 pages.
Yeah. It's something short. Yeah.
I've tried Nietzsche Beyond Good and Evil several times. And I've just never made it to the end.
I tried.
It was that is
the only Nietzsche I've tried is Anarchist, and I'm like, I get like 10 pages in, and I'm like, I just can't anymore. It's so dense.
Did you Nietzsche, you have to dude, you have to really because the problem, especially with like Beyond Good and Evil, right? It's like almost every single line you could dissect and go into like a 40-minute dissection with it. It's like,
right.
Okay.
So I the first time I tried to read Beyond Good and Evil, we were able to bring one book to Iraq with us. So I brought Beyond Good and Evil. And my goal was, I'm not going to turn the page until I understand every line on the page.
Yeah.
And I'm not bullshitting you. There were some hour-long pages. Like, I would read and reread and reread until I fucking felt like I got everything that was.
Yes.
But it was so tedious that I, eventually just threw in the towel. But
yeah, I think if you're really like into philosophy, like I do think that Beyond Good and Evil is probably one of the best philosophical works written, but you have to understand that it is like philosophical. Like you're gonna like Nietzsche is going to come up with answers to questions you never even thought to ask, type thing. You know what I mean? Like it's hard to even process. So yeah, I totally get that. It's dense. It is really like it's not even just dense, it's like levels of dense. Like there's interpretations to each paragraph or each sentence that's like, well, what does he really mean by this?
yeah I mean, it's been a while since I tried, but I just remember like the frustration.
Yeah, I know, dude.
So I'll start with the myth of Sisyphus, and like maybe that'll give me a level of confidence that will push me ahead.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I was told that this book I've been waiting on for months is about as chunky as it gets, and I'm about to dive into this.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
I've heard the same thing.
I'm going to go back and rewatch the lectures on it, like I kind of have that route. So I kind of know where it's going, but yeah, I've heard Maps of Meaning is one of the hardest books to read.
Yeah, and you know,
I know
go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I know he gets a bad rap, and I mean, once he kind of like started trying to play savior, I lost it. But like, yeah, some of his those lectures on the Old Testament were fascinating. I don't go to church. I avoid that stuff.
I consider myself agnostic. Yes.
I'm like, dude, if you can make the Old Testament interesting, you got a gift.
Right. Yeah. And you know, this kind of goes back into like what the original topic of this podcast or this episode was, Tommy, where it's like like Peterson's whole thing is that, like, you know, as human beings, we create this drama, right? We create this narrative, this inner drama, and this inner drama reflects on society outward, right? It's not just something that like is internal, it is expressed externally, and it's kind of like a story. And you know, there's someone I didn't bring up or who I wanted to, but I don't know if you got Johann Huizinga was his name. He was a Dutch cultural philosopher.
I've heard of him. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so he wrote this book called Homo Ludens, right? And as opposed to Homo sapiens, which is like how Homo sapiens are generally referred to is like, you know, a man is a rational animal. And what Huizinga says is essentially in this book is that man is a playful animal, and ludens is essentially a translation that means play, but not play in the sense that, you know, we're just necessarily just playing a game or something like that, but it has a much more broader sense of play, right? In the sense that man creates narratives and stories and plays them out and acts them out, and it's kind of a way to look at just human interactions themselves, and also just like how society is born from that. So society, like the Homo Ludens whole thing would be that what we see, like when you see like ritualistic things, that's a game, a shared social game that is being played with people, that if you just looked at it from a material sense, you would just think that, oh, these people are just kind of weird or they're doing a thing, but it has a very significant emotional like affect, as you were saying with like what Higgs was talking about, right? So human beings create these games that help them interact in the world and give them self like purpose and meaning. It's a very good book, and I definitely recommend people check it out if they've never read it.
Well, let's go that route real quick before we jump off here. Let's give me one nonfiction, one fiction.
Oh God. Okay. I've already said mythicists, so I won't say that. God. Actually, Joshua, I need to think about this. You want to take it first?
I mean, I already mentioned it. The Moon is a Harsh Mistress, I think, is a great kind of real world-ish. I mean, it's a fictional future universe, a penal colony on the moon, but it's fascinating. There's zero weapons. So like, the whole libertarian thing is like, well, what if they come and take our guns? Well, this penal colony used their industrial equipment that the state provided them to fight back. So I think it's got a good message that like, hey, as stacked against you as the odds may be, you can win, you can prevail. It's a little bit of a difficult read because I don't know why it's written this way. It's either written this way because, so the man befriends a computer. That's the whole premise. And the word "the" is not in the entire book. So imagine reading a bunch, like, 100,000 words without "the" being present in any.
Yeah, the most common word in the English language is not there.
It's an awkward read, but you get used to it eventually. So I'll go that with my fiction. I'll say Markets Not Capitalism. I'm still working my way through it, but like, good God, like, I don't agree with all of it. Like, some of the property stuff is a little bit for me to swallow, but I mean, I'm keeping an open mind because I'm like, well, I was raised in this paradigm of natural rights, so that's all I've ever known. So like, I can't just completely dismiss these property theories because it's not what I've known. But like, that book has been, I just for me, like a paradigm shift for me. It's just so unlike anything I've ever read, and it redefines things that I thought I knew.
Yeah.
And it brings clarity to things that I thought I knew. So I'll say Markets Not Capitalism. That's
a great book. It totally will shift if an ANCAP approaches Markets Not Capitalism with an open mind, it'll shift completely how they think of the market.
Yes. Yeah.
But you have to be open-minded about it. And, fortunately I was like, okay, like, what is this? Oh, Sheldon Richman is involved. Okay. I want to know.
Yeah.
So
before I give my book answers, I do want to say something real quick about that. Like, I think one of the more beautiful things about like talking about markets in particular is the fact that when most people talk about markets, they think of like the stock market or something like that, or just numbers going up and down, stuff like that. But really, when I'm talking about the market, and I think when most anarchists they should be talking about the market, is what the market really is the sum of just voluntary interactions, right? That's what I mean when I say market, at the very least. And I think that if more anarchists could communicate that, it would be a much easier sell, right? Because if you factor in that, then like people interacting in a communal sense is also a market interaction, and people aren't taught to think that way.
Right. Yeah.
For my to get to your answer, to get to the answer of the question you asked though now.
That's all right. I'm still thinking. So.
Oh, okay.
I asked, and then I was like, "Oh shit, what are my choices?"
Oh, right. So, So for nonfiction, the book I'm going to recommend is actually a book that my co-host, Anarchist, gave me, which is by Viktor Frankl. It's called Man's Search for Meaning. And it is a book about, so Viktor Frankl was a psychologist, but he was chronicling the experiences of prisoners in Nazi concentration camps in World War II. And I won't spoil it, but it just goes into like how the psychological difference between how the prisoners thought about their experience and like what gave them a sense of meaning. And it's a very powerful book. Definitely recommend people go for it. And I'm going to be, I guess, a little normie here for my nonfiction, but I think it's one of the greatest American works of fiction ever made. And that's The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn.
Oh, yeah.
I think Huckleberry Finn actually encompasses probably the American ethos, like the idealized American ethos of like what an individual is supposed to be and what an individual is. It has a very strong individualist message, and I don't want to like spoil it for people, but it's on my it still holds a high place for me.
Yeah, no, The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn is absolutely one of the best classics ever written.
Yes.
I'm actually going to go kind of obscure with my fiction, a book
Fantastic.
that not a lot of people have read, but I find to be one of the most intriguing fiction reads I've ever read 6 times, and I want to read it again because I still can't wrap my mind around it. It's kind of like that. You ever seen that movie Lost Highway?
No, I don't think so.
So it's a bête noir. It's a thriller, but it's one of those thrillers that you watch it like 2 times and you're like, oh, I think I'm getting it, and then you watch it that 3rd time and you're like, oh wait, I don't understand yet. And you watch
Right.
it again trying to figure it out. And I've watched that movie like thousands of times, and every time I think I'm about to get like what it's talking about, I just can't quite grasp it. But at the same time, I'm addicted to watching it because it flows so well. You know what I'm saying? So, so the book is called House of Leaves by Mark Danielewski. It is so interesting because it's written partially in first person, partially in third person, and then part of it is visual and not literary. So part of it is the way you're seeing the words on the page versus what the words are actually saying. So you're kind of like paying attention in this multi-dimensional like book. It's very interesting. It's a very interesting book. Some pages you turn to and only have one word on the page. You know, like it's just interesting the way it's written. Very kind of almost psychedelic in a way.
Okay.
But it has I'd say it has a very trad message with a very non-trad
Style.
plot.
Oh, okay.
Like,
Yeah.
period. Like, yeah. So it's a really interesting way to kind of like expand your ability to read and
Sure.
and just gather information. As far as nonfiction, I would go with something really simple, and it's an entrepreneurial book called It Starts With Why. Because no matter what you're doing in life, if you don't have a why in front of you as to why you're doing it, it's gonna leave you like you're gonna lose interest. You're not gonna succeed. And so for those people that want to spread the message of liberty, you really got to figure out why you want to do it. Why are you trying to spread a message? Are you trying to just be the smartest person in the room? Or do you really give a shit about liberty, about the future generations, about what's coming up behind you?
Right. Yep.
I could actually sit here and fucking talk about all the books we've read forever. I'm getting all excited about like changing my books that I recommended, but I'm not going to do that because we got to go, I'm sure. Ace, one more thing real quick. Did you brought up Huck Finn. I didn't know you were into like classic literature like that. Are you familiar with The Heart is a Lonely Hunter?
Oh God, I read that a long time ago. I do, it's hard for me to remember, but I read, yeah.
So that was the first novel full disclosure, as being a writer, I didn't read any books all through school.
I was kind of sparse too. Yeah.
I only read like enough to write a report, and then just because I was way more of like a shyster or like a shady student. Like I would just and I did pretty well. Like I just did enough to get by so that I could go do what I actually wanted to do. But The Heart is a Lonely Hunter is like the very first book I ever read, and then I just reread it a couple years ago, and it holds up. Like, gorgeous book, beautiful, beautiful snapshot of like early 1900s American South. Like,
Right.
It's kind of to me. It just seems like a lost, like a picture of American society that just doesn't really ever get seen or talked about.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to reread it because I remember reading it a long time ago, and I remember liking it. But I'm sure I'm sure if I read it now, I'll come away with more than I did before.
I'm feeling the same way, because I'm like, I do remember reading that, but I'm not sure that I remember what it was about. So, I've often had an idea, and maybe we'll do this sometime, just the three of us, like, jump on a podcast and do this. But I've often had an idea of grabbing some of, like, some of these classic literary, like, books, and like doing podcasts on classic literature and how we can apply the knowledge we get from classic literature. Because I was such a fucking classic literature dork in high school, especially Beatnik.
As long as it's not Dickens, I won't read any more Dickens ever again.
Yeah. No, I was like really big into the Beatnik movement. I loved reading like Aldous Huxley and Jack Kerouac and those guys.
I get into that, yeah.
Yeah. And then fucking Bird tweeted the other day that like the Beatnik movement was some commie cover or some shit. And really hurt my feels, man. Really hurt my feels.
Did you like go on a rant in his DMs about it?
I didn't. I said, if you would have said this to me 5 years ago, I probably would have gotten mad.
What was the didn't that guy, what was the one, he had the sticker on his guitar that said like, "This machine kills commies," or something like that?
Oh God. Yeah, I can picture it, but I forgot his name too.
He was pre-Kerouac. My brother read him, and I can't remember the name. Never mind. I shouldn't have brought it up.
I don't know.
I do that all the time.
I don't even
like,
know if I've ever seen the picture. So
I'm like a visual thinker, so a lot of times I'll remember the image forever, but I'll forget the name or something.
Oh wait, you're telling us you don't have a photographic memory? Because that's like the only explanation I have for you existing.
I do not have a photographic memory, unfortunately.
How many times?
Woody Guthrie.
Oh, that's right.
Okay. This machine kills fascists.
That's it.
He had a sticker on his guitar that said, "This machine kills fascists."
Gotcha. How many times do you read these books so you know them so well? I'm talking to you, Ace.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. You cut out for me. What was the question?
Oh, I was saying, how many times do you read these books? How many times have you read Sterner so that you know him so well?
Okay. You know what's weird is that for some reason, I don't know what it was, but when I was first getting into libertarianism, I read so much because I also wasn't a huge book reader. When I read here and there, and I read some some of the classics, but when I was growing up, I wasn't big into books. But when I got into libertarianism, I read for like 2-3 straight years. And I just consumed as much as I possibly could on the topic. And then for some reason, I do remember like stuff like that. So like I have a quasi photographic memory for like some libertarian things, but other things I don't. So I can't really explain it.
So much of the focus of my podcast is to point out abuses of power and how bad things have gotten and the direction in which we're heading as a society, and it can be a real black pill. I've partnered up with Richard Grove to offer my listeners an opportunity to sign up to his Autonomy Course. The Autonomy Course is designed for people looking for solutions, people that want to shape their own future, people that are not willing to be at the behest of large corporations or the United States government or the banking system. The Autonomy Course is designed for those of you who wish to have complete control of the reins of your life, who are looking to be successful, to thrive and not just survive, to provide for your family by utilizing your existing skills and learning how to market and sell those skills in order to be your own boss, or learn new skills in order to leverage that into a new career opportunity. So if there's a job out there you've been trying to get or you've been wishing you could get, but you just don't have the skills for it, the Autonomy Course is the place for you to start, to learn how to land that position, to learn how to market yourself better, to gain confidence, and to be surrounded by a community of like-minded people that will encourage you and help you along the way. So use my affiliate links and go check out the Autonomy Course. It could be right for you.
It's
if you give me a book and you ask me to read it and then you give me a quiz on it, I'll ace that quiz. But if you ask me 5 years after I've read it, who said blah blah blah, I'll be like, I don't fucking know. It's one of them guys I read.
For me, it's kind of hard to, like, unless I know I'm specifically talking about like Stirner, who wrote just, you know, his one book pretty much.
Right.
If you tell me like I remember like most of Rothbard's writings, but if you ask me which book did he say it in, I'll be like, that'll be kind of hard. You know what I mean? Because they all kind of blend together.
Yeah.
So I remember the content, but it's hard to discern where exactly it was.
Gotcha. Yeah. No, it just cracks me up because you're like quoting these people, like you were in that debate, and I'm listening, and you're like quoting like obscure like shit, and I'm like, how does he even fucking remember who these people are? I've never even heard of these people.
Yeah, I don't know, dude.
All right,
he's just
man.
got it like that.
Yeah, he's fucking king, man. Like I'm just.
Oh, I can't accept these compliments, but I appreciate them.
I
appreciate them.
I get on Twitter, and if I don't see that he's posting at that moment, I go back and I look and see what he was posting 3 hours ago, because because I'm like, I'm bound to learn something. But no, man.
If
like
nothing else, learn how to talk to neocons.
Right.
No, I'll never learn how to do that.
That's what I don't get is like, where the fuck do you find all these people?
Yeah, no, honestly, dude, like people ask me this, and honestly, sometimes it's like they just find me and I don't know where they find me from. Yeah. So some people think I like search these people out, but then no, I never do that. They almost always find me from somewhere else, or I see someone, or sometimes I'll see a comment under someone else at one of my mutuals posts, and then I'll quote tweet that. But generally, they just find me. I don't know.
No, I know.
Like,
I know you're not. I know you're not out searching for them, because I've searched for these kinds of conversations for like 3 days one time, and I was like, I can't find any of these fucking people. I don't know how Ace finds these people that have 12 followers that seem to know everything about foreign policy.
Right. I was arguing with British neocons the other day. I didn't even know these people were real. It's just like, oh, like I don't want to know that neocons are real, let alone neocons from other countries.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, for sure. All right, I'm gonna stop the recording. We can bullshit on the other side.
All right. Thanks so much, Tommy. And good meeting you, Josh.
Hey, good meeting you too.
Said you're just a slave. All your good intentions took you to your grave. Your pride is how they killed you. With the flag you wave just like a fool. They promised you a mountain, gifted you a stone. They demanded that you throw it into your neighbor's home, and then seize all that they worked for and give it to the throne just like a tool. Well, as we all just stand in line and glorify new ways of being cruel, it seems to me humanity is not something that they're teaching us in school. They dumb us down all around, propaganda, their pollution. They set a cage up on the stage, a facade for all solution. They build a wall, block them all from this mental institution. It's insane. Now they're writing their own rule books and they're crossing all their T's. They're fashioning their people to all wear beggars' knees. If you want a clean drink of water, well, you must say pretty please. It's all a game. As we all just stand in line and justify these crimes done in our names, it seems to me authority and tyranny are both one and the same. And sacrificial right, just like we should. Cause this world needs a cleansing to burn away the shame and destroy all the remnants of those who are to blame. And we'll stack them up like cordwood, watch them sizzle on the flames for good. Well, as we all just stand in line waiting for some kind of Robin Hood, our liberty will never be until our right to freedom is understood. Thank you.